Is it too late to start an Etsy print-on-demand shop? I hear this all the time, and it's what I heard from many people before I started my Etsy shop in January 2023. But then, against what everyone else was saying, I grew my shop from 0 to 6 figures in 10 months my first year. And today, I'm going to be sharing with you exactly how I did that and what my actual profit was when I really broke down the numbers. We see a lot of information out there about revenue numbers and sales. We don't always hear about what really went into it and the profit that was made at the end of the day. Hey there, I'm Emily, and I help busy people like you and other side hustlers launch, grow, and scale their Etsy print-on-demand shop, even if you have zero design experience or zero business experience. If you are on the hunt for a low-risk, flexible side hustle, then you might be in the right spot. And if you love learning about Etsy and print-on-demand, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Now, let's dive in to my first year on Etsy. I started selling on Etsy as a New Year's resolution in January of 2023. I was working full time and I had been working in education for many years up until that point. And I was just having the itch to do something from home where it was more flexible and I could pay off student loans and spend more time with my kids and be able to pick my daughter up from the school bus after school every day when I stumbled across a video about print on demand. But again, I kept hearing there's too many people selling on Etsy. Etsy's become too competitive. And so I wasn't sure if it was actually going to work. And then to my surprise, it did. So if you're new here, what is print on demand? So print on demand is actually just a fulfillment method, which means you create a design, let's say in a tool like Canva, you add it to a product from a catalog from a site like Printify, maybe a mug or a candle or a t-shirt. And when someone orders that product from your Etsy shop, Printify does all of the work of printing, packaging, and shipping that item for you to your customer, which makes it an incredible side hustle for people like me who have limited time. Maybe you're working full time, maybe you're a parent, maybe you're looking for something to do during nap times or after your kids go to bed. And so print on demand became a great option for me. But like I said, so many people kept saying it's too competitive and there's not enough opportunity. And I decided I was going to try it anyways. And so I'm really excited because when I first started, I loved watching these videos about what people were actually making in their Etsy shop. What does that first year actually look like? The people who are finding success, whatever that means to them, what does that time look like that's invested? What lessons did they learn? And so I'm excited to kind of break that down for you so you can have a realistic view from someone who did scale their shop to 6 figures in a year and what that actually took. So I'm going to be sharing with you 5 lessons that I learned during that time and also showing you my real revenue and profit numbers. Okay, so let's dive into how I did my first year on Etsy selling print on demand. Now, we are going to dig into the things that I did that really moved the needle in my shop, but I wanted to show you first overarching stats from the year. So, overall, my first year on Etsy, you can see here, did 127.7 thousand visits to my shop. So that's the number of shoppers coming into my Etsy shop and my listings. I had over 6,900 orders and my conversion rate was 5.4%. Now, this is even more so than anything, the stat that I'm actually most proud of. So what is a conversion rate? The conversion rate is the number of people per 100 people that come to your shop that actually then purchase your item. So for example, for me, out of 100 visitors to one of my listings or to my shop, 5.4 people purchase something. Typical conversion rates, you'll see lots of different numbers, but those typically fall between 1 to 3%. And so having one above 5% was huge for me that first year. And the lesson that I learned from that, I'm going to talk more in depth about, but it really has to do with getting to know your customers and also really doing that research to understand what people want, because then you're not throwing spaghetti at the wall and you're actually giving customers the products that they want and that they're looking for. So then your conversion rate is higher. And when your conversion rate's higher, you don't need as many people to come to your Etsy shop because instead of one person buying every 100 visitors, you have over five. So that's something I really am proud of and something that was very exciting that first year. Now, drum roll please, my revenue in my first year on Etsy from January 2023 to the end of December 2023 was $173,648. And I like to point out first that I'm incredibly proud of that number because a lot of work went into this, but two, that this is revenue. And so we're going to talk about profit at the end of this video. So if you want to see how much I actually took home from this, stick around for that. But I earned $173,000 in revenue on Etsy my first year, which is absolutely insane to me as someone who had zero experience in any of this, no design experience, no business experience, no experience on Etsy. This was absolutely mind blowing to me. And so I'm incredibly proud of this number. But again, that's not necessarily what I was taking home, but it was a huge number for that first year, and I could not believe it. So let's talk through a few of the pivotal moments in this chart that you see here from my revenue and what that looked like and kind of what shifted throughout the year. All right, before we continue, we are going to stop here for this week's coffee and cha-chings. So this question I get often as someone who has both a print on demand shop and a digital products printable shop. And the question I often get is, can you sell both digital products and print on demand in the same Etsy shop? And the answer is it depends. And the reason for that is a couple of things. First, you want to make sure that the products make sense to be sold together. So, for example, if you had a brick and mortar store, let's say you had like a store on Main Street or something, you would want to make sure when someone enters that shop that it makes sense for the products that you're selling to be sold together. So, for example, let's say you sell gifts or t-shirts for teachers and nurses and it's kind of career oriented, and then your digital products are maybe teacher printables or nurse gift card holders. That would make sense to sell those items together because they flow together. Or let's say you sell products for events. Let's say you're selling gifts for baby showers and bridal showers, and then you're doing printable bridal shower invitations with that. In that case, it would make sense to sell those together. But if you're selling mugs for accountants and then you want to do printables for little kids, then that really isn't going to flow together. Now, here's what I want to say about that. The second thing is you don't have to have this figured out right away. I remember when I first started, I was taking in all this advice and thinking, well, I don't even know who I want to sell to or what I want to do. Take time to experiment, to test things. But if you end up in a place where you are selling printables and print on demand products and they are to very different audiences, you may want to consider at that point breaking them into two shops. So that's this week's Coffee and Cha-Chings. And don't forget, if you want your question answered on a future Coffee and Cha-Chings, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. All right, so let's take a little bit of a sneak behind the curtain and see what worked this first year for me. And so as we go through the course of this first year, I'm going to be sharing with you things that really changed the trajectory of my shop and my sales. So, one of the first questions that I often get is, how long did it take you to get your first sale? What should I expect? When can I expect to get my first sale? I had opened my shop in December, but I hadn't listed anything. In January 1st, 2023, I was like, okay, this is it. New Year's resolution. We're doing this. And at the beginning, I was getting some sales. You can see down here. And these were from my wonderful family. This was from my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, other people that were being supportive. And I should say, I really didn't tell anyone that I was doing this because I wanted it to be something that if I failed, that people wouldn't know, but I also just didn't want a ton of people in the loop. But I did tell immediate family about it, and they were so wonderful to give me some of those first sales. But when was my first organic sale? That came actually a week into my shop, which sounds really early, and it felt like a huge milestone at the moment, but it was followed by many days of no sales also. So I like to say, that first sale can come at any time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to start getting daily sales right away. But it's a huge milestone moment. It's a huge moment of just like hope, like, oh my gosh, this actually works. And so that was a big deal for me. And in January, I had two organic sales, which felt monumentous to me. It was like a huge hurdle to overcome getting that organic sale. So you can see here, my first month was relatively quiet. Most of my sales were from friends and family that were being supportive, and I was so grateful to them. But I only had about two organic sales, which was again huge at the time. So that was my first full month on Etsy. Now, going back, you can see here that I did take a jump up in March and in the spring, and that was due to my first tip for you was being in tune with trends that are out there. I happened to stumble across something that was a trend, and I somehow honestly, I will be honest, it was probably luck. I stumbled across it and I listed it and I started getting sales right away on that shirt. And then the second shirt also became a bestseller around that time, which was something politically affiliated. It was a trend in the political space, and that one also took off. But both of those went up and they also came down. But that was great momentum for me to be able to kind of get those first bestsellers. And I really saw my numbers kind of tick up a few months into my Etsy journey. Now, when did things truly change? And that happened about April going into May in my Etsy shop. And what did I do at that time that really changed things? The answer was shifting to gifts. Now, up until that point, I had been selling t shirts and some sweatshirts, but mostly t shirts. I had done some of these trendy things, but I was kind of learning that that wasn't necessarily the best fit for me. I'm not super trendy. I'm a millennial mom with two kids running around changing diapers. So, keeping up with trends or following things on TikTok really wasn't something that suited me. And so I shifted to these giftable products that I was finding in my research that were selling really well and didn't seem to have as much competition. And I share what that first giftable product was that I sold in a video, and I'll link it below for you. But I listed one that night and it sold that very same day. And so you can see here, I shifted to gifts and my revenue started increasing, and you could see those numbers here. And from there, things kind of stayed up. And then obviously you can see here that things started to go up, and we're going to talk about that in a sec. But this shift to gifts really helped me propel my shop kind of to those higher numbers. And again, this is when I had that aha moment. One thing that really stood out to me was Etsy customers were leaving me reviews or sending me messages that said like, so and so loved this as a gift. So and so loved this product for their birthday or their retirement or their graduation. And that was a big aha moment for me. And that's really when I shifted away from apparel and started focusing on these gifts. And I really didn't know, because again, I had no experience. I didn't know what would be coming for me in quarter four. So before we jump into what Q4 looked like for me, and if you're new here, quarter four is the last 3 months of the year, October, November, December, which is also known as the busiest time on Etsy. It's the holiday season. And I had no idea what to expect, and I was not prepared. So let's look at my numbers and give you a clear vision of my numbers from 2023 leading into Q4. So you can see here, starting small and then gradually growing. This is when I had kind of that best-selling two t-shirts. And then this is when in May I started shifting to these giftable products. And you can see here I hit almost 14,000 in revenue, and then in some of the slower months of June and July I was at about 12. And then August things started to go up again, $17,000 in revenue. In September, kind of that $15,000 in revenue. And so you can see that jump from, even though I was feeling really happy about these numbers, things truly started to increase here. But then Q4 was coming, and I was I underestimated entirely what that would look like. And hello. So, October, I hit $21,000 in revenue. November, $53,000 in revenue, and December as well. This was absolutely insane. And when I calculated what I made from January to September equaled the same amount of revenue I had in October to December, which was insane. And a big reason I attribute these numbers in quarter 4 was yes, people are buying apparel, but gifts were so key. I was selling so many gifts. My Black Friday numbers were over 125 orders. And up until that point, I had probably been averaging about 10 to 15. And on Black Friday, I got 125 plus orders. And again, I was totally unprepared for that. I was super excited, but very unprepared for that. So let's talk about what this time commitment looked like to get me from these numbers here all the way to these numbers here. I shared with you a couple tips that helped along the way. One being really tuned into trends if that's something that works for you. And number two was switching to gift products. And that was truly a huge game changer in my shop. So, number three, the next thing I want to talk about is the time investment. So, a lot of times we hear about revenue numbers, profit numbers, all of that, but we don't hear a lot about how much time it actually takes to learn and invest into this. And when I'm working with students, I will often tell them it is so important to be patient. And patience truly is one of the keys to success in this whole process because there is a lot of time where you are not seeing any reward for the work that you have put in. So you might be putting in hours of time and not seeing any sales, hardly seeing any favorites or views. And I want you to know that's not uncommon. So, just to give you a realistic picture of what it was actually looking like in the beginning for me, I worked a 9 to 5 job and I had 2 kids. So, typically, what I would do is I would take my lunch hour and I would work on designs and work on my Etsy shop during that time. And then, after my kids went to bed, often most nights I was spending on my laptop trying to figure this out. And so I was spending several hours per day really working on this. I'm full disclosure, very fortunate that at that time my kids were going to bed right at 7 o'clock. So that gave me about 2 to 3 hours that I could really work on this. And then, as I said, during the day, during my lunch hour, I work from home. So I was able just to hop over to my personal computer and be able to work on my shop during that time. And I know that time commitment may not be available to you or to everyone. And so that's why I always say don't compare your journey to somebody else's because we all are coming into this with different circumstances. And so that's really important to remember when you're doing this. And that patience piece, I see so many sellers quit before it gets good. I was just talking to a student who I worked with in a one on one capacity earlier last year, and she was having a really hard time kind of staying patient through it all. And this year, she's really seeing the reward from that patience. She just hit her 800th sale and she is seeing some great success. She's got her first bestseller badge. And if she had given up back then when things were quiet, then she might not be where she is today. So, again, number three is going to be stick it out even when it's quiet. And it is going to take time, regardless of what you see all over the internet. This isn't a make one product and make $10,000 next month kind of gig. The fourth tip I have for you that helped me propel my shop in this time was being incredibly responsive to customers. So often you'll get messages from customers asking if you can customize something or if they can make something or if you can make something for them. And I was a yes person. I did just about anything that first year to make a sale. Now that has obviously changed now. And now that I am in the place that I am with my shop, I'm able to decide what I'm comfortable with or not comfortable with in terms of my time and being able to give time. But at that time, I was willing to customize anything. I was responding to customer message within 15 minutes. I was doing whatever it took to be able to build up those sales numbers. So again, while this can build into a more automated passive type of job, in the beginning, this is going to take time. There's a lot of grinding it out. But again, I was willing to do that because I could see the potential. I could see what the future might look like. And so being really responsive to customers, being willing to customize things, being willing to personalize things, being super, super on top of my messages, really keeping my rating up with Etsy was a huge one for me. And the last thing, number 5, that I want to talk about in terms of how I went from 0 to 6 figures in 10 months was focusing on 1 to 2 product types. In the beginning, I was really trying to do everything. I was trying to do t-shirts, I was trying to do sweatshirts, I was trying to do bags, I was trying to do mugs, and I really wasn't getting anywhere. I was spinning my wheels a lot. But when I made that shift to gifts and I decided to focus on one product type at a time, I saw a huge impact. Why? Because I was able to dig into what is selling well on that product, researching what those customers really wanted. Did they want something funny? Did they want something sentimental? What kinds of colors were working? What kinds of fonts were working? What occasions, niches, all of that was really working. And when you stay surface level because you're doing too many things, you're not really able to dig into understanding what the customer wants. And going back to that conversion rate we talked about at the beginning, that is huge because when you can really understand what customers want, you're going to be able to convert your products at a much higher rate. So don't be afraid to just stick with 1 or 2 product types and really give it 100%. Doesn't mean you can't pivot, doesn't mean you can't add on later, but that is going to be a big, big key because then you're able to focus and you're able to really dig into what your customers are wanting. So to recap, there were 5 key things that I think help get me from 0 to $173,000 in revenue on Etsy in my first year. Now, what you've probably been waiting for. What was my actual profit from those numbers? So let's dig into those. Okay, so my first year on Etsy, my total sales. Now, this obviously looks different from 173,000, but the number that Etsy will give you for your taxes was $222,000 and change. And why is this number different? Because this number is going to include shipping cost and all of that included. So your revenue does not include those numbers, but your total sales do. So this was my total amount that customers paid for products from my shop. My average profit margin my first year on Etsy was 28%. Now, that has since increased to above 30%, a little bit higher than 30%, but on average, my profit margin that first year was 28%. Now, I know for some of you, you might be thinking, oh, that feels a little bit low, but when I think about it, I am at the point now where I'm spending about 10-ish hours per week on my shop. And I'm never having to touch or print or package or do any of that. I'm doing all of it from my laptop when I can. And so for me, these margins are definitely worth it because I'm not spending full-time hours on this anymore. And I really didn't at the time, but I'm not spending full-time hours on this and I'm not having to touch or store or keep inventory or anything like that. This first year, I had kept my prices a little bit lower. And then over time, I have increased those. And again, I've increased my margins. So overall, my profit my first year was $62,000 and change. Now, again, this is not spending full time hours. This is doing everything from my computer, and this is never touching anything. So I will gladly take that any day. And like I said, those numbers have just since gone up. My profit margin has increased. And that's because over time, I've raised my prices, I've gotten more confident about it, and that has helped a lot. So, what might this look like for you? And what I always like to say is this journey is different for everyone. Regardless of what you might see all over social media and on the internet, this isn't a get rich overnight kind of thing. And so everyone's journey is going to look a little bit different. But as I mentioned before, when I first started, I loved watching these videos just to know what was possible, just to know what the success and the trajectory looked like for other Etsy sellers. And so I hope this has been helpful for you. And to answer our question from the beginning, is it too late to start selling on Etsy? The answer is absolutely not. There is so much opportunity out there. There are so much room. I am seeing new sellers and new shops that have launched in the last year, hitting their first 800 sales, hitting their first sales, hitting their first 500 sales. 10,000 sales, etc. There has been so many new shops that are seeing great success. And a lot of times they are following a lot of the strategies that I talked about today in this video. And now that you know what worked for me in my first year, I would love to hear from you about your journey on Etsy. So please feel free to share below in the comments. And don't forget to hit like or subscribe if you want to see more no fluff content about Etsy and print on demand. My name is Emily, and I look forward to seeing you next time.